Excellencies, dear colleagues, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to who has joined us online or will late watch this video. Welcome to this new session of the Geneva Nature-based Solutions Dialogues, co-convened by the Geneva Environment Network and the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which we refer to as IUCN. As I keep reminding in these dialogues, IUCN, headquartered in our region, is an essential global actor contributing to the global environmental agenda. We have again the pleasure to have with us today leading experts from their network. These nature-based solution dialogues aim to facilitate further engagement and discussion among the stakeholders in International Geneva and beyond on the role and opportunities provided by nature-based solutions in the lead-up to major environmental negotiations. Today, we are hosting the 8th dialogue and we will be focusing on cities. This week, on 31st of October, we will be celebrating the World Cities Day, which theme is Adapting Cities for Climate Resilience, inviting us to rethink how we can reduce climate-related risks for urban populations, including through the use of nature-based solutions. We have with us today leading experts who will be speaking on the key role of nature-based solutions in this context. Our guests will indeed discuss the potential of nature-based solutions for sustainable urban development and resilience, and the needed future action to mainstream nature-based solutions in urban planning and policies at the city level. We will also be welcoming a guest champion message that you will discover just before we start the discussion. We interact with you, our attendees. Before we go into substance, let me remind you that the documents presented today, the summary, as well as the video of the dialogue will be made available on the webpage of this event. My colleagues will be sharing the link in the chat. Throughout the event, you can raise your questions by using the Q&A box. We will use your questions to feed the discussion after the presentations. For those who don't know me, I am Diana Rizzolio, the coordinator of the Geneva Environment Network, and as a former member of the Parliament of the city where I'm based, I am particularly looking forward to moderate today's session. I will be introducing our leading experts when I give them the floor. We have divided today's sessions in two panels, one bringing the multidisciplinary and multi-scale partnerships in cities, and the second focusing on cities action. And to set the scene of this session, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Chantal Van Ham, the Acting Director of the European Regional Office of IUCN. With that, Chantal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Diana. It's a great honor to open this webinar on cities and nature-based solutions. And thank you to the organizers of the Geneva Nature-based Solutions Dialogues, who are every time creating an inspiring exchange. And they have done so today as well with this wonderful lineup of speakers. So I have in my next slide a statement and a picture. And it says there that there are 10,000 cities on planet Earth, and half of them didn't exist 40 years ago. And I think too many of us who work in this area on nature and cities are well aware that human activity has unfortunately impacted nature in practically every part of the world, with wild plants and animals at risk of extinction, deforestation and land degradation causing water scarcity and erosion, and also climate change leading to many effects such as acidification of oceans, scarcity of water, and unbearable temperature increase. We know that urban ecosystems are extremely degraded, that we have poor planning resulting in sealing soils and leaving little spaces for vegetation. But we also know that urban planning would benefit tremendously if we recognize the connection between cities and their surrounding ecosystems. And there is so much we can learn from the extraordinary wisdom that nature has. In today's highly urbanized world, we very often forget that voice that nature is. We don't hear it or we don't listen to it. But cities may, as we know, not only be the place where most of us live, but also they harbor a very significant fraction of the world's biodiversity. So they can also be made more livable and more nature-friendly if we learn from nature. And I've written an essay for The Nature of Cities, a fantastic platform that brings together experts from around the world sharing their experiences. And in one of my essays, which was titled What Nature is Telling Us, I tried to highlight what we can learn from nature. And it speaks, for example, about the hidden world and life of trees, which are connected through these systems of fungi, but also are home to the world's most smallest creatures, knowing that if we lose that, we may also lose perhaps the foundation of life on this planet. Ants, also very small creatures, and we know how wonderful they are and that they are really present in every ecosystem of the world. They actually can tell us a lot about the qualities and results of restored landscapes. Many things that we don't know, for example, that bats play such an important role in combating corn crop pests, that we can save millions of euros and dollars in reducing damage to crops, something that many people are not aware of. So just some examples. If you're interested to read, there is so much to find on the nature of cities. But for IUCN, which you can see on my next slide, the cooperation with cities is a growing priority. IUCN considers cities and subnational governments as the key partners in achieving our international biodiversity and climate objectives, as well as the sustainable development goals, and therefore we engage in various projects and initiatives with many of our partners present here today, especially Icn. As you can see here, Cities with Nature as an important platform to give cities access to knowledge on nature and best practices. So we also have seen this growing interest for cities in IUCN culminate in a new membership category at the IUCN World Congress that took place last month in Marseille, where now subnational governments can become part of the global union of members. And we hope that that will bring also new opportunities to connect IUCN's global expertise about nature and biodiversity to cities and to help them also to integrate the value of nature better in their plans and their work. This is also reflected in IUCN's global program for 2030. And we have established 3 years ago the Icn Urban Alliance, led by my colleague Russell Gold, who is developing a tool called the Urban Nature Index that is a way for cities to assess the value of their natural assets and explore how that in their local context can help to integrate nature better in all decision-making processes at the urban level. And for this, we work closely together with many of the partners here today, as well as other members and experts of IUCN, to also make it something useful and user-friendly in particular. You also see on this slide Panorama Solutions, which is an initiative that IUCN has launched some years ago with a number of partners that now also has a thematic community on sustainable urban development and resilience, which comprises hundreds of inspiring and impactful scalable solutions for nature conservation in cities. And we also encourage users to add their own experiences and in that way sharing ideas and learning from different parts of the world. You also see on this slide Nature for All, an initiative that was launched by the IUCN Commission on Education and Communication and the IUCN World Protected Areas community that is a way to inspire a movement for love of nature, connecting people with nature, and that is also meant to advance our thinking and problem solving skills related to the many challenges that we face for nature. There are many interesting tools and resources on that platform. It's open to join for everyone. It doesn't only focus on cities, but also on other types of ecosystems. But yeah, it is for us also a way to create more connections and opportunities to learn and share. You also see here on this slide the Urban Protected Areas. That is a publication that was developed some years ago, and that looks at that connection between our protected areas, our pristine nature, and how that also, of course, comes closer and closer to cities, which are growing. And there is a lot of knowledge in this publication that also helps protected areas managers in finding the balance between this urban growth, while at the same time treasuring and preserving these natural heritage for the future. So I have one last slide to conclude, to also highlight that IUCN really would like to build new partnerships for action to share our knowledge and expertise and to make sure that nature conservation also really becomes part of the actions at the urban level, as we know that investing in nature-based solutions, trees, rivers, parks, wetlands, urban forests, but also other vegetation can help cities to provide these services and benefits that we need to address climate change, but also many other challenges such as health. At the same time, this can help to save a lot of money in preventing, for example, flooding and other climate-related disasters, but also reducing air pollution and reducing urban heat. So in general, this can make such a benefit for the resilience of cities. And I think we all share that mission of this century to make sure that we restore our natural areas and that we disconnect economic development from environmental degradation, so that we really create that balance between nature and the living environment, at the same time also business opportunities that are regenerative and not harmful to our planet. And we believe that cities are excellent places to create that change and to also tap into that incredible knowledge and the creative minds that are gathered in cities for new innovative ideas, but also to create new business opportunities. And thankfully, we see more and more cities in the world joining on this path. So I'm very pleased that today we can hear more about this outstanding work on urban nature from IUCN members and partners such as Icn, UNEP, the World Resource Institute, but also the cities of Cape Town and Sao Paulo, who have many inspiring stories as being true pioneers that have the courage to really make the change that we can see happening through investing in nature-based solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chantal, for setting the scene and bringing an overview on how IUCN is engaging on this topic. And indeed, let's see how cities are creating the change with the leading experts we have with us today. So let's now move to the first panel, which will be discussing multidisciplinary and multi-scale partnerships in cities. As I introduce a new guest, I will immediately give her or him the floor for his elevator speech on the gaps and opportunities for nature-based solutions in the context of cities. So we will be starting with Cobby Brand, who is the Deputy Secretary General of ICLEI, in charge of local governments for sustainability. You are also, Cobby, the Regional Director of ICLEI Africa and the Global Director of ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center. Cobby is bringing to this panel perspectives on implementing nature-based solutions towards a cohesive urban society. Over to you, Cobby.
Thank you very much, and what an honor to be here today. And Chantal, to follow on your very eloquent words, my dear friend, we are certainly, our hearts are green, and it's wonderful to be part of this fantastic panel. We know that greater levels of biodiversity and nature mainstreaming in cities leads to greater levels of resilience. When a city does not take nature-based solutions into account, it becomes less resilient and diminishes the capacity of that ecosystem to continue providing services for nature and people. Healthy ecosystems can act as buffers against hazards and the impacts of climate change, while building resilience, sustaining livelihoods, creating jobs, and supporting recovery actions from disasters. Cities and regions are therefore very much part of the solution. And I'm proud to be representing ICLEI here today to show how we are working with cities and local governments to implement NBS towards a cohesive urban society. One such example is our Interact Bio project, which provides expanding urban communities in the global south from 3 continents with nature-based solutions in their associated long-term benefits by means of pilot projects implemented on the ground. The project enables governments at all levels, from local to national, to integrate their efforts for mainstreaming biodiversity and ecosystem services into core subnational government functions, such as spatial planning, land use management, local economic development, and infrastructure design. Interact Bio, funded by the government of Germany through its ICI program, is instrumental in the design and conceptualization of cities with nature, which Chantal spoke about, one of our flagship global partnership initiatives. Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature are both global partnership initiatives which aim to enhance the value of nature in and around our cities and regions across the world and provide shared platforms for cities, regions, and their partners to partner, learn, connect, commit, and engage with each other and multiple stakeholders towards a more sustainable future. By bringing cities and regions together, Cities with Nature and Regions with Nature aim to mitigate local threats to biodiversity on the global level through international collaboration and provide a space for all kinds of cities and regions to learn and share and showcase their actions and commitments. These two programs or platforms provide benefits, tools, resources, and technical services not only to the city and regions administrators, but also to all stakeholders, including urban communities and scientists that join these free and easily accessible platforms. And the two initiatives are especially successful because of the involvement of major partners, such as our friends at IUCN, UNEP, WWF, WRI, and many others, as it is only through collaborative exchanges that we know important commitment can be achieved at the scale we need it. There is overwhelming scientific consensus and evidence that indicates that nature is essential to human existence and that nature plays a critical role in meeting our societal needs. The sustainable development of natural resources, therefore, has an important role in achieving the SDGs. By effectively deploying and working with nature, we are able to resolve major societal challenges brought on by climate change. Nature works tirelessly on our behalf, providing us with our essential needs. In order to tackle climate crisis head-on globally, cities around the world have to rethink and redesign how they treat and incorporate their natural infrastructure. Natural resources management needs to be strengthened through improved policy, governance, and collective action. Therefore, nature-based development is one of our ICLEI 5 key pathways where we commit to protecting and enhancing the biodiversity and ecosystems in and around our cities, which underpin key aspects of our local economies. And ICLEI Africa, as you said, rightfully, hosts ICLEI's Global Cities Biodiversity Center, where we engage our cities through various means, such as advocacy, leadership development, peer-to-peer learning, local implementation projects, and physical and virtual engagements. We therefore support local leaders to apply sustainable governance practices and advocate multi-level governance in the negotiation and implementation of the UN conventions. I must say, I'm encouraged by the great work that is taking place in various cities, not only in Africa, but globally, and indeed around the world, the initiatives that we see coming through on mainstreaming NBS. And I'm hopeful that the more this happens, the more we will see that nature-based solutions are indeed cost-effective and sustainable ways in reducing disaster management and risks, and they are also essential in growing our urban communities, their economies, and to adapt to climate change. And here I thank you, and I end with these words, that it is in our togetherness, our partnership, that we can and that we should deliver an urban change that the world needs right now, with nature, for nature, and by nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirby, for reminding us the key role of cities and sharing ICLEI partnerships and initiatives and its nature-based solutions agenda. We move back to Geneva with our next guest, Paola Deda, who is the Director of Forests, Land and Housing Division of the UN Economic Commission for Europe, or so said UNEC. Paola, we will hear from you about sustainable urban forestry and the potential of trees as nature-based solutions in cities. Over to you, Paola.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you for inviting us. As you can see from the name of my division, we are really dealing with both forest and urban development. And indeed, this is nature-based solutions are a priority for both work on forest as well as cities. Well, I'm also very happy that you decided to focus one of these dialogues on nature-based solutions on cities, because cities actually will host the 2/3 of humanity by 2050. We will be in an urbanized and urban world. And achieving local objectives and national agendas for sustainable development and the SDGs depends on having vibrant and resilient cities. We cannot do it without the support and the engagement of cities. Moreover, as we are going towards the COP and we talk a lot also about solutions for climate, we should remember that cities are actually responsible for about 75% of global CO2 emissions. And they are on the forefront on the fight to climate change as well. So we need to work with them to change cities themselves if we want to tackle the issue of climate change. Next slide, please. Very briefly, something that you, of course, working in this area already know very well. What are the benefits of trees in cities? Well, first of all, climate is not only because of their absorption power, but also because their cooling ability. They are able to cool up to 8 degrees in cities if we have alleys that are covered with trees. This is not a minor result. Also, a well-connected network of trees in our own cities brings, as we have heard already, biodiversity, helps us maintaining. And when we talk about trees, of course, we talk about trees within their system and ecosystems. Of course, there is also an enormous impact on public health, not only because of purification of air, but also to allow people to reach sustainable areas and pleasant areas like parks and urban parks and trees. However, accessing the benefits require more than simply planting trees. We have to move from planting to what we say growing trees in cities, really creating the ecosystem, making sure we select the correct species, making sure that we build the correct ecosystems for the city we are looking at. We also notice where we deal a lot with the real estate market that trees in cities also increase the value of the housing and the buildings we are finding that trees next to. However, we also have to remember that in planting trees, as I said, it's not only a matter of putting some trees wherever there is space, because this will be a liability on the long term if we don't make sure that we take care on the long term of the entire network of trees, the ecosystem, and the single trees themselves. So when it comes to, next slide, please, when we look at in general into the challenges of growing trees in cities, there are several ones that we are recording at the moment. The first one is actually a policy challenge. There is lack of strong laws to conserve the tree canopy cover in cities. There is rather missing engagement of various city stakeholders and communities, and also unfavorable conditions to access adequate finance. This is something that we have heard a lot from the cities we are engaging with our projects. As far as planning is concerned, there is competition, of course, a limited space. We know how expensive urban land is, especially in certain locations. Lack of cross-sectoral cooperation between different sections in the municipality, and also missing a long-term perspective. Trees don't grow in a day. We know that we are looking really at the next generations when it comes to a mature tree. Challenges also in management, ever-changing conditions caused by global warming. We are noticing that many cities are losing certain species to the benefit of others. there is absence of sophisticated management concepts and knowledge to create them, and of course missing monitoring benchmarks to improve performance. We know it's not easy also to monitor urban forestry and trees in cities. To overcome these challenges, of course, cities need context-specific, long-term, sustainable urban forestry strategies. And this is not easy because there is not one solution that fits all. We have actually experienced this because UNEC also is looking at policies, but is also focusing on action. And we have realized that the context is very important, that each city is peculiar and requires specific solutions. We have learned this because we established recently an informal network of experts on sustainable urban forestry. This network includes city representatives and experts that are invited to participate in a sort of knowledge exchange and learn from peers. And there is really a lot to be learned still on urban forestry. And as I said, certain solutions that apply in a city cannot be necessarily replicable in another. Also to stimulate action, so sort of to support advocacy in this area, but also a real impact. We have implemented what is called the Trees and Cities Challenge since 2019, and that's a global campaign inviting mayors from all over the world, not only from UNEC region, to commit to restore, protect, and sustainably manage urban trees and forests. It's a sort of bond challenge for cities, and we are working a lot with IUCN on the bond challenge for our region. This is a small bond challenge for cities. So far, cities from 16 countries have joined the challenge. They have pledged over 11 million trees, and we have actually really planted over 8 million trees, setting some context-specific management targets as well. So I stop it here. I don't want to take too much time on this, but just to let you know what we are doing and stress the important message that we are not looking only at trees or urban forestry, but really setting new, complete ecosystems in cities, and that we believe will be the solution to make cities much more viable, sustainable, and contributing, of course, to climate change mitigation, adaptation, as well as biodiversity conservation. Thank you. I had a long list of cities that were covered by this Trees and Cities Challenge, that joined the Trees and Cities Challenge, but I think that you can easily go on our website and see the cities there. Thank you, Diane.
Yes, thank you, Paula. We will also indeed share that link. So thank you, Paula, for sharing UNEC engagement and some challenges related to trees, ecosystems in cities and urban forestry. With our next leading expert, Renata Polini, we move to the private sector. Renata is the head of nature at Allsim. She leads the development of Allsim nature strategy and represents Allsim in various groups, including, I'm not listing them all, the Task Force for Nature-related Financial Disclosures, Business for Nature Call to Action, and in nature projects out the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Renata, over to you to bring here the challenges and opportunities of nature solutions in cities from a business perspective.
Thank you so much for the kind invitation. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, discussing this very important topic, nature-based solutions in the cities. I work for Allsim. I'm the head of nature. And for those who do not know, Allsim is one of the largest building material companies in the world. In September this year, during the IUCN Congress, we launched our new nature strategy. And among other goals, we are committing to deliver a measurable positive impact on biodiversity, backed by scientific standards, to replenish the fresh water we use in water risk areas, but also to reconcile nature with cities by deploying nature-based solutions. At Allsim, we see many opportunities by deploying nature-based solutions, but we also have some challenge when implementing the nature-based solutions. I will start with the opportunities. We all know that the challenges of climate change and biodiversity loss are intrinsically linked. Both are critical societal challenges. Nature-based solutions could address 1/3 of reduction needed to limit the temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. In nature, we find the most effective ways of combating climate change. By implementing nature-based solutions in the cities, we can minimize heat island effects, we can enhance biodiversity, restore the nature water cycle, and even improve air quality. Therefore, nature-based solutions not only reduce the impacts of climate change, but also increase resilience against those impacts. At Holcim, we have some solutions which we want to start positioning as nature-based solutions. For example, we have a product called Hydromedia, which is a permeable concrete enabling rapid evacuation of water directly into the soil, producing a nature aquifer recharge, allowing, for example, urban forests to grow. Also in our portfolio, we have the green roofs, the famous green roofs, which is a roofing system covered with a layer of living plants over a waterproofing membrane. This improves air quality, rainwater management, and enhances biodiversity in urban centers. However, and unfortunately there is always a however, we face some challenges when implementing nature-based solutions. First of all, there is a need for agreement on technical nature-based solutions definitions, standard, and measurable indicators. This needs to be complemented with knowledge of impact, potential trade-offs, and incentives for business to accelerate implementation. And then last but not least, we are a large company, Holcim, but we know that our impact in the world is limited. So in order to scale and accelerate the uptake of acceptance of nature-based solutions, we would need actions at a governmental level to be taken. We need to mainstream nature-based solutions in urban planning and policies at city level. Only when we reach this stage of attention, others will be able to join us, amplifying our positive impact on nature. Thank you so much. Back to you, Diane.
Thank you very much for sharing concrete examples on how you apply nature-based solutions in cities and some of the challenges you face. And it reminded me some discussions we had in the land management when I was a member of the parliament of the city. Continuing the discussion on multidisciplinary and multi-scale partnerships in cities, it is now my pleasure to turn to our next speaker, who is Rowan Palmer. Rowan works at the United Nations Environment Program as a program officer, where he leads the Sustainable Infrastructure Investment Team. Prior to joining UNEP, Rowan worked also as an environmental manager for infrastructure development projects in his home country, Canada. Rowan, you are bringing to this panel perspectives on the shift needed towards more integrated approaches to planning and delivering sustainable and resilient infrastructure to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement goals. With that, over to you.
Thanks very much, Diana, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. So, as Diana mentioned, I'm going to talk about the links between sustainable infrastructure and the SDGs. We know that infrastructure sits at the heart of the SDGs. It influences 92% of the 169 targets across all 17 of the goals. And so this means that it touches upon the social, environmental, and economic aspects of sustainable development. And there are complex interlinkages between these domains and infrastructure that we build in all sectors. And so this complexity is both a challenge and an opportunity. It's a challenge because it can be difficult to manage, but an opportunity because well-planned investments in sustainable infrastructure can have positive impacts towards multiple goals at the same time. And so at UNEP, we work with many different partners to support governments in adopting needs-based integrated approaches to sustainable infrastructure. And so this kind of approach takes service needs as a starting point and then considers how to meet those needs in the most effective way that optimizes the synergies and the trade-offs between the economic, the social and environmental outcomes of infrastructure development. And a major part of this is the recognition of nature as infrastructure and prioritizing investments in natural infrastructure and nature-based infrastructure solutions, including integrating them with great infrastructure development. And so this is particularly relevant in the urban context. I think as we've heard from some of the other speakers, in cities and especially large cities, there's a huge concentration of infrastructure. So there's high potential for integrated infrastructure solutions. And particularly with respect to nature-based solutions, the kind of services that nature-based solutions can provide are often particularly relevant for urban areas. We've heard from some of the other panelists about the benefits of public health, of services like air quality improvement, water purification, shade and cooling that can be provided by vegetation. Also, nature-based solutions can be particularly effective for increasing the climate resilience of other urban infrastructure. 21 of the 33 megacities in the world are located in low-lying coastal areas. So nature-based solutions for flood protection, for example, will be something that is particularly important over the coming decades. And then to bring it really to the topic of this session, which is on partnerships. Partnerships are especially important for nature-based infrastructure solutions. As we've heard, nature-based solutions can have broad benefits and co-benefits, but we need partnerships amongst different actors to quantify and communicate these benefits to different groups in order to mobilize the support and the investments and financing needed to really implement nature-based infrastructure solutions at scale. So partnerships between, for example, the environmental, the health, and the business communities, among others. Partnerships are also important because we need to design cities with nature and nature-based solutions in mind from the beginning. So this means that different types of policymakers and practitioners like designers and biologists and urban planners and engineers and landscape architects in the public and private sectors need to be partnering and working together from the early stages of infrastructure planning. And then finally, cities not only have nature in them, as we've heard, but they also exist within nature and within broader ecosystems. So in addition to nature-based solutions in cities, we also need to be thinking about investing in natural infrastructure outside of cities because it still provides many important services to urban populations. And so this means that we need partnerships between different cities and communities that exist outside of the cities. At UNEP, we lead the Sustainable Infrastructure Partnership, which is a network of partners working together to support countries implementing integrated approaches to sustainable infrastructure more generally, and then specifically on nature-based solutions for cities. My colleague Martina Otto has been leading a team that's been working closely with the Italian presidency of the G20, and they recently released a working paper on smart, sustainable, and resilient cities, the power of nature-based solutions. And I can provide a link to that publication in the chat for anybody that's interested. I think my time is up, so I'll stop there, but I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Rowan. And for concluding this first round of pitches, I'm giving the floor back to Chantal Van Ham from IUCN, bringing her perspectives on nature-based solutions as a successful ingredient for urban sustainability agendas. Chantal, over to you.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting to see these very different perspectives on nature-based solutions, in particular, as we have representatives here from city networks, from the private sector, and also from cities, as we all work, of course, in our day-to-day life in different contexts with different partners and stakeholders, and in particular with often very conflicting agendas that all are based on that same landscape and with the scarcity of resources and of course the scarcity of land coming in many of those ideas and suggestions. But I think all of us here share that same vision that in the end we can only find a way forward if we bring together first of all these various ideas, but also the creative minds of all these different partners who may have sometimes different agendas, but in the end will probably only benefit if they can work out the solutions together to create less friction and to also look at the positive sides that nature can bring. And I think that over the last years, many of us who work in this field have realized that there is much more awareness, first of all, for this opportunity that nature brings. On the one hand, through developments that we see happening in many countries of the world. Unfortunately, many climate-related disasters have really showed us how impactful destruction and degradation of nature can be, and also how costly the restoration and the rehabilitation from these impacts can be. So I think with that we have reached the next level of our awareness also when it comes to the next steps in follow-up to the global pandemic, which has brought nature, I think, even closer to people's minds and hearts, and also to our economic agenda in terms of the recovery plans. But also, I think many businesses are now really considering new ways of looking at how they manage their resources, but also how they integrate that whole concept of nature and regenerative systems more into our practices, in our business decisions. And indeed, also Holcim has highlighted that here very strongly, that there are ways in which we can make changes that have benefits for the business model, but also for nature and for people, and in that very complicated way of structure of working that we have. So I think it'd be really interesting as well to hear some of the perspectives of our city decision makers here present today, those who work with the different partners on the ground. We as an organization, IUCN, of course, work very much at institutional level and at scientific level, but also to some extent providing guidance and practice. But I think it's really important to hear what all these ideas mean in real day-to-day life, when we have to make very tough decisions on how we plan for our urban future. So I hope this gives a bit of reflection on what we've heard before.
Yes, thank you, Chantal. It's a good transition for the next panel we are hosting, and we are with the next speakers that will be now taking the floor. So we are moving to our second panel, which is about nature-based solutions for cities in action. And I am turning to Ellen Ding, a senior environmental economist at the World Resources Institute, where she provides thought leadership in the area of landscape restoration, economics, and finance, and leads research projects in this area, and also for accelerating nature-based solutions to climate mitigation and adaptation. Ellen, over to you for an overview on creating sponge cities with nature-based solutions.
Thanks, Diana. Thank you very much for inviting me to present at this panel. And it's my pleasure to share some of the work we're doing in China on sponge city. And as I agree with many of the panelists in the previous panel, that nature infrastructure is really important, not only as a solution to climate mitigation, but also important for climate adaptation. So sponge city is actually one of the examples we could consider. Over the past year, WRI has investigated in Wuhan sponge city construction as an example of nature infrastructure to adapt to climate change impacts. And we've also conducted the first of its kind analysis in China to systematically assess the economic returns of investing in nature-based solutions for increasing climate resilience infrastructure in rural, urban, and coastal environment. And sponge city is a new urban construction model proposed by Chinese researchers in 2014. The concept was actually originated from the Western concept of low impact development that many of you are probably familiar with. The difference is that it uses nature infrastructure, such as green roofs, retention tanks, wetlands, etc., to absorb storm water, and can also be applied to inland cities with abundant water resources. And is particularly useful for urban flood management, by just strengthening the ecological infrastructure and also the draining systems in the city. And Wuhan city is one of the first 30 smart city pilots in China. In our recent study, we found that in the two demonstration sites, as you can see in the red circle, nature-based solution could help increase the total annual runoff control rate from below 70% to over 80%, which is really important and can effectively mitigate urban flooding risks and build urban resilience in the face of climate change impacts. It can also generate important co-benefits, as many of the previous panelists mentioned. For example, green infrastructure can increase the property value, improve stormwater recycling, increase groundwater recharge, and increased urban vegetation can also regulate microclimate, sequester carbon, control air pollution, and increase recreational and ethnic value of the urban living environment. So it's really, really important. And next slide, please. So on this map, you can actually see a lot of the cities that are selected as the smart city pilots in China is with highly ranked GDP production every year, but also located in areas with high flooding risks. Between 2015 and 2016, about 30 cities have been selected for smart city pilots since the launch of the concept back in 2014. And more recently, in April 2021, just this year, another 20 cities were added to the pilot program. So if it's well implemented, China could basically scale up those pilots to the whole countries. And it is really important opportunity for China because as it started to implement this, the 14th five-year plan this year, the policy priorities has already made it very clear constructing new infrastructure will be the priority for China. And adding smart city in the new infrastructure construction would bring a very important opportunity for China to increase the total resilience to climate change impacts going forward. Next slide, please. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have conducted a new report looking especially at the economic benefits of nature infrastructure in China as a solution for climate adaptation. And the report will be launched on November the 8th, on the Climate Adaptation Day. And in this report, we actually identified a couple of key challenges facing sponge city construction or other nature-based solution infrastructures in general, including, for example, as we need a systemic kind of understanding of the climate risks, and we need a comprehensive understanding of economic value and additionality associated with those kind of infrastructure. And we also face a challenge in finance shortage in general. So focusing on Wuhan smart city construction, we did a cost-benefit analysis to assess expected economic returns on nature-based solution, and discussed important and challenges to scale it up in China in general, and also explored potential financing mechanisms in general. So in order to leverage more finance, it is really important to identify mechanisms which will allow us to better quantify those benefits, and in order to leverage private capitals to fill the finance gap. So with that, I will just stop here. Thanks very much. Back to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Hélène. We are now moving to a new continent with Rodrigo Ravena from the city of Sao Paulo in Brazil. Rodrigo is Chief of Staff of the Secretariat for Green and Environment of the city of Sao Paulo. So Rodrigo, over to you to bring perspectives on integrating conservation and biodiversity into city development for economic recovery and social inclusion.
Thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad to say that we are not so far from what the rest of the world are doing. We are trying to, I can see that we are doing almost the same thing, regardless the difference between our cities and our countries. But I'd like to show you the pictures of the city of Sao Paulo and the various challenges that we have. This is a picture of downtown Sao Paulo. And we have different nature-based solutions for each part of the city. In this area, we are increasing the soil permeability with rain gardens and parks. We already give to this part of the city in this year two new parks, and we increased from 110 parks in the city to grow permeability and increase better air and living quality solutions. Next picture, please. This is another area that is already very green and with lots of trees. And we are trying here to just manage what we have. We propose and we get a law by to take care of the urban afforestation and to manage, as Paula said, to manage the trees. We have to take care of them. We have to maintain and increase these areas that are already green enough to sustain life and to grow biodiversity in the city. Next picture, please. And we have areas like that increasingly occupied by buildings, very few green areas. And in these areas, we are trying to create corridors with street planting, to connect these small dots of green in the middle of the buildings, and with a policy that is for the whole city. We create laws that put together all the actions of the secretaries in the city, that if someone that is putting a gray infrastructure in this area will necessarily put some green in the infrastructure. And we are planting, in these areas are as priority to create the corridors and to put more green in these areas. Next picture, please. And we have areas like that are spring areas where we get our water. We are trying to increase conservation unities in these areas to create areas with green and sustainable use that can include people to preserve the areas. So we start a plan too, and it's a lot also, to pay for environmental service in these areas, to make people to understand that it's better to make this area conservated, and you could occupy that with sustainable economy and sustainable use to preserve the area that brings water to the city. So we have a series of actions in Sao Paulo, and one I regard very special. We try to create an index that we can show people the importance of biodiversity. We call them this index Biosampa, and it's based on Singapore index. so we can show and integrate people in the policies that the city is trying to do to increase nature-based solutions in the city. It's very important to understand that if we don't get people involved with we are trying to do, we are not doing anything. So education and inclusion is very important for the city to take nature-based solutions. We have to bring resilience and biodiversity together, but also we have to improve quality of life and health. And furthermore, we have to create jobs and create opportunity to the people that live in all these different areas of the city. We have 12 million people. It's a small city comparing to China, but for the parameters of South America, it's a very, very large city. And so we understand that bring nature-based solutions to the city necessarily has to put together biodiversity and the people who live in these areas. So I finish here and wait for the debates, and I think I give a whole vision of the city and what we are trying to do.
Yes, you did, Rodrigo. You have shared concrete examples of what you do. Actually, some of these examples are also applied in other cities, but the size of Sao Paulo must certainly make things more challenging. And you mentioned the parameters of a specific country in Asia, but in Europe and Africa also, Sao Paulo remains a big city in the context of these continents. And we are now moving actually to the African continent with our next speaker. We have the pleasure of welcoming in this session Bongani Mnisi from the city of Cape Town, where he leads the management and development of the Environmental Management Department. Bongani also led the part of the city's biodiversity network, including various nature reserves, and he serves as a chairperson on various boards. Bongani, over to you for a perspective on protecting natural assets and promoting green infrastructure for urban well-being and resilience.
Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. And thank you for inviting me this morning. Yes, I'll be sharing with you nature-based solutions, Cape Town examples. Move on to the next slide. I'll be just covering just a bit of, what I think in the previous presentation we have seen and we know what nature-based solutions are, and also sharing a bit of green infrastructure, as we call it in Cape Town, and obviously the importance of mapping and proclaiming such critical biodiversity. It's one thing to have biodiversity, but if it's not protected under national legislation for perpetual conservation, you might as well not do it because the next leadership may just build on it or change it into something else. And obviously showing some critical projects on the ground that we've done. Next slide. And I think what I quite like about this definition by IUCN is that it talks about the protection, the sustainably managed, as well as the restoration of natural system, as well as the modified ones. But it is merely done to address societal challenges and merely to provide human well-being and biodiversity benefits. I think this is a well-balanced definition that really defines what nature-based solutions are, and it really it's no-brainer. This is the way that the city must develop, is the way they must combine its economic development as well as the societal contribution and benefits to its citizens. Slide. And in here we see on the left-hand side that is a map that we call the Green Infrastructure Network. And in that network, you would see various shades of green, and the dark green in there, would often, look to the proclaimed nature reserves in the city. And you've got, the national park, which is more pale, and the lighter green, which basically talk to various open green spaces within the urban area itself. We do understand and know that a city without natural open spaces, it is a dead city. people do need nature. We all come from nature. We all understand that, and we can't pretend that we can live without nature. And, you know, moving on from that, what the city of Cape Town has done is to recognize the value of having various guidelines. You would see the tree guideline here, and not only using that, but developing various plans, working with the bioregional plan, local biodiversity and action plans, you know, and various other programs, you know, important, like the environmental strategy, that basically it's what the environmental management department implements, which is very, very key in the city. But getting those into city policies is very, very critical. And also implementing actions that, you know, make it easy for people to enjoy the city, its open, you know, places, especially, you know, riverways and corridors. Next slide. And in here you see the map of the city of Cape Town showcasing the various nature reserves that are proclaimed in the city. And it's fair to say that the proclaimed nature reserves in the city, you know, count about 55,000 hectares of biodiversity that is vested into, you know, natural spaces. And this is about 22% of the city surface area. I mean, this, you can understand that it's not much in comparison to other cities, but city of Cape Town is high in biodiversity. If it was possible, you would have the entire city proclaimed, but we have to do what we can to ensure that we protect biodiversity for the benefit of biodiversity as well as people. Next slide. And in there, we're showing just a picture of saying the city cannot do it alone. Various private properties are owned by you know, private individuals. Now, working with those individuals to have their land vested into biodiversity in perpetual conservation, it's very, very important. You can see in there over 2,000 hectares have been proclaimed at this moment. Thank you. Next slide. And here, once again, very, very interesting slide. I'm not going to talk to the figures, but you can clearly see what that means. You know, invasive species taking so much water in, you know, in 1 year. And in Cape Town, which nearly ran out of water, you'll recall between 2015 and 2018, you know, 55 billion liters of water, you know, approximately 2 months, you know, worth of water in Cape Town. And by clearing these, you are able to release water, and it's basically a cheaper way of, you know, managing Cape Town's water resources. Hence, the city has seen the need to invest even more resources getting that done. Thank you very much. Next slide. Can get more, and then these are just pictures of showing various projects in areas where there's development. We take the actual topsoil, we move it into degraded areas. You may move on into other pictures. I'll go very fast with these pictures. My time is gone here. Also looking at the urban, you know, livable urban waterways. In other words, here with engineering, you can build anywhere. But as a city that recognizes the value to, you know, flood attenuation, you know, to make sure that also you increase properties in these areas, you have to leave these green spaces, not only for water itself to prevent flooding, but to make the city beautiful in itself. And you can see there, you may proceed. That is the source to sea, again, making sure that we let water be water, you know, so that we may be protected even heavy floods. I mean, Cape Town, you know, has experienced various floods and people that have built in low-lying areas, especially the informal settlements. But in areas like this is what the city do to work with nature to protect people and its development. Next picture. Again, this picture that you see here, and immediately the picture after that, you will see that buildings are covered in sand and things like that. Now you go back to start working with nature to make sure that you hold that sand in order for it to be beneficial to the city. I will end it right there. I think that's my last slide there. Thank you very much. I'll wait for the engagement.
Thank you, Bongani. Thank you for sharing these images and examples. The last speaker of this session is Mariana Vidal Merino, a senior research analyst at Plant Adapt, where she actively participates in the Friends of Ecosystem-Based Adaptation, their urban working group. She's a lead author of the recent publication, Climate Justice for People and Nature Through Urban Ecosystem-Based Adaptation. Mariana, over to you for an overview of the potential of ecosystem-based adaptation for climate justice in urban areas.
Yes, thanks so much, Diana, and hello, everyone. I'm quite honored to be closing the second round of exceptional contributions. And I've truly enjoyed hearing a lot about how nature-based solutions actually works in practice and how it makes our cities more livable and beautiful. And I would like to keep exploring nature-based solutions, challenges, and opportunities, but to do that now with you under a climate justice perspective. And I think this is an exercise that is quite interesting, but also necessary, because we need to look at climate change in our cities as a problem that is not only of a physical or environmental nature, but also as a problem that is very much political and ethical. And as we all know, in the climate change equation, historically marginalized communities, such as communities, low-income communities, communities of people of color, and indigenous communities, are the ones that bear the most acute impacts of climate change, while on the other hand, they are the ones that are the least responsible for creating the problem in the first place. So when implementing climate change solutions in our cities in general, but specifically nature-based solutions in our cities, we need to consider concepts of justice, because otherwise what would happen is that we have a high risk of replicating or enhancing existing inequalities in our cities. Such inequalities may include the unequal distribution of green and blue spaces within a given city, which also leads to the unequal distribution of the environmental services that nature-based solutions provide. That not only includes the social benefits of making our cities more beautiful or reconnecting people with nature, but also issues like reducing the urban heat island effect, or reducing noise, reducing air pollution, and risk of floodings. Another potential negative impact of implementing nature-based solution is, for example, that low-income communities may be outpriced for areas that have been aesthetically improved via implementation of nature-based solutions. And I've brought today a couple of examples, I don't know if they are available, brought from the city of Lima. So the first, you can just keep clicking on the images. The first two images correspond to the typical images that you will find if you Google my home city, Lima, that is like really nice green spaces, a vibrant city next to the coast. But also if you actually look at the areas where low-income communities live, or communities with a migration background that is coming from other regions of the country, normally they will look like this, or like the picture right after. And that is really a complete absence of green and blue colors in there. I won't go into detail due to time about the reasons behind these differences, but of course it is really directly related with areas of high income and commercial areas versus more marginalized districts of the city. And the FIBA Urban EPA working group that I am a member of conducted recently a study on climate justice for people and nature through urban ecosystem-based adaptations. As we know, EBA belongs or falls under the umbrella of nature-based solutions. And this Thursday, we are launching this publication via an online webinar. So if you are interested in joining and connecting, I think the registration link will be shared briefly on the chat box. And I'm commenting this because the results of this study are quite insightful. They highlight the remarkable potential of nature-based solutions to deliver social elements such as participation and inclusiveness, capacity building, fairness and equitability, gender consideration, and livelihood improvement. The majority of the case studies that we have analyzed stem from the Global South, and they reported a high degree of social considerations in both the design and implementations of EBA interventions. Moreover, case studies reporting far-reaching social impacts, which is remarkable because it also shows that nature-based solutions naturally has these predispositions of bringing about these social benefits to it. While these results are quite encouraging, I also wanted to highlight that currently the evidence from nature-based solutions in the urban context of cities of the Global South is still quite scarce. And I will stop there. Thank you. Back to you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Mariana. With that, we have concluded our two panels, and because I want to keep time for the discussion, there is no much transition. We have the habit in these dialogues to bring a champion that we don't present beforehand. So I'm going to let you discover the champion we are bringing you today. Actually, he just joined us also, so he's here listening to what you have said. And so I will ask my colleague to launch the video.
Charles Burchfield lived from 1893 to 1967. He is legendary for his watercolor landscapes painted near his Western New York home. He was also a great journalist, and over his lifetime wrote over 10,000 pages in various handmade volumes. He wrote, "It's difficult to take in all the glory of the dandelion as it is to take in a mountain or a thunderstorm." And so they are difficult to take in, both for their beauty and their complexity, their context. How can you describe and assess them, convey the idea of them to someone who hasn't seen? You finally stumble and say things like they're beautiful or amazing, or maybe you recite a list of facts about them. All of us as scientists and decision makers, artists, practitioners have to comprehend, depict, and quantify such multidimensional entities and then communicate the results in ways that aren't hopelessly obscure, that are somehow specific and not only metaphorical. That is, we need to communicate a very complicated thing in a simple, essential, and useful way. We need to tell good stories. Art is really good for that. Art, in collaboration with other practices, is especially good at that. Words like improvisation and imagination and intuition, while natural for artists, can sound awkward for scientists and planners. Yet these are the very abilities that we need to be able to see past and beyond the details. This object here, that process there, to create and understand how a vast and majestic thing works and how it might change. This is the essence of good storytelling, something we all need to get better at. Perspective is another key word, a sense that of what you value in the vision you are creating, while recognizing that there are other perspectives, other points of view. The dandelion is up close for Burchfield. He values them. The sky is there too. We need to see the patterns and perspectives from different angles. Feel the beating of the heart and not just judge the heart's location in the chest. How do you take in this complicated multidimensional thing like a mountain or a forest or a curlew or a city? Through acts of imagination. Whose imagination? Well, everyone's. From artists and activists and scientists, planners, designers. And I can tell you that such imagination is most activated when they are mixed, cross-fertilized, transdisciplinary, to create something new, something that we could not have created by ourselves. This is the 1 + 1 = 3 of joined imagination, innovation, and collaboration. What is that famous saying? Not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. Intelligent and fact-grounded imagination is a powerful thing. It is that plus values which can lead us to say, that dandelion in that spot is beautiful. And so it is. This way of knowing is true for art. It's also true for science and design, resilience, sustainability, justice, biodiversity, art, creativity, all propelled together in a mix of ideas and creative storytelling that truly communicates ideas across boundaries of disciplines and points of view, across boundaries of misunderstanding. Let's imagine across boundaries and tell better stories. How do you take in a complicated multidimensional thing like a mountain or biodiversity or a forest or a neighborhood or a city through acts of scientific and social and creative imagination? As summer changed to fall, Burchfield himself felt the same urge to imagination. He wrote in 1950, all day on the gateway to September, putting in the huge insect tree in the August part. For the first time in weeks, I let myself go in improvisation and fantasy.
So here we are back. So you have heard David Maddox, Executive Director of the Nature of Cities, an ecologist and theater activist, who is also with us now. And I apologize, I have received messages. Not all of you were able to see the video, but the link was shared in the chat. As we don't have that much time left, I was asked by the co-organizers of this event to go back to all our speakers, asking them for some key messages that they take away from this event. They will have 1 minute each, and I will give the floor. The last person to whom I will give the floor is to David Maddox, our champion. So I will start with Kabi.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And David, what a fantastic video. Definitely, I'll share it again with everybody in Italy. So inspiring. My message is, yes, together we can. The time is now for all of us to incorporate nature-based solutions and help bring life and integrity back to damaged ecosystems, stimulate economic recovery, and set ambitious targets to make our cities livable, resilient, sustainable, safe, and inclusive. We need nature. We cannot do it without nature. Let's take care of nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Kabi. And indeed, we saw a lot of interesting examples shared today. I'm now moving to Paula Deda from UNEC.
Thank you, Diana. And I had actually prepared one take-home message, but after the hearing what we heard today, I think I'll change it slightly, because I heard a lot of very good case studies, and by the way, congratulations to the cities that presented, because they're on the right track. But I haven't heard much sense of urgency from other presentations. And I'm speaking now as an architect, so those that are building the cities, and when I look at the perspective of those that are building the cities, not many, as mentioned, for instance, by UNEP, are integrating nature-based solutions in their infrastructures. Not at all. It's very rare. And that's why we highlight the good case studies. Moreover, I think that while we have to look at new structures, and cities are growing exponentially and very fast, there are also old cities that really need and would benefit from nature-based solutions. So we have to look at what has already been built and how it can be transformed. And for that, it's good to talk about nature. It's good to have organizations that deal with nature, but we really have to reach out to those that build. So the architects, the designers, the urban planners, and the decision makers in cities. Without them, we will not go very far. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I'm moving to Renata Polini.
Yes, thank you so much. What an inspiring webinar. I think what we heard from the panelists is that nature-based solutions have a lot of potential to reduce climate change, the impact of climate change, but also biodiversity loss. But we need to scale up and accelerate the uptake of nature-based solutions all over the world. We saw some examples of cities that are doing great in this direction, but we need to scale up and accelerating all over the world. We would need many things for this, but I guess one key takeaway from me is that we need to work together in collective actions. We need NGOs, we need private sector, governmental authorities, and communities, as said by Rodrigo Ravena in Sao Paulo. To join forces, we need to think together, inspiring ourselves in nature, be creative, as David said, to find and implement effective nature-based solutions.
Thank you, Renata. Let's hear from Rowan on the way forward.
Thanks very much, Diana. For my closing message, I want to talk about the need for a change in mindset beyond our environmental community and amongst some of those groups that Paolo mentioned, the engineers and the designers and the planners. I read a recent report by the World Economic Forum that estimated that more than 50% of global GDP is dependent on services provided by nature. So even if we're taking the most cynical view and only thinking in economic terms, then we have to recognize that nature is one of our most important infrastructure systems. If we account for the social and environmental benefits provided by natural infrastructure systems, the case becomes even more compelling that investments in natural infrastructure and nature-based solutions on a large scale can and must play a central role in our efforts towards achieving the SDGs. Thanks.
Thank you, Rowan. And let's now hear from Ellen on the way forward.
Thanks. Having heard so many inspiring talks, I think I just wanted to go back to the issue around financing. Again, investing in smart city or other nature infrastructure in urban areas is really, really important and highly cost effective, not only just in terms of their potential to avoid flood damages due to climate change impacts, but also for the multiple benefits they're creating for both urban ecosystems and the citizens live in. So my closing, I think maybe call for action is that we really need to invest now in urban resilience and in nature infrastructure. It is important for researchers, civil society, financial institutions, and policymakers to work all together to investigate solutions and innovative financing mechanisms to accelerate finance for nature. Thanks.
Thank you, Ellen. We move on to Rodrigo to hear from him on the way forward.
It was very inspiring, and it's urgent to continue doing. We are trying to do and continue doing and put everybody together. And the final message, we cannot leave anyone behind. We have to put all together, biodiversity and people, to bring, to make a better city and to preserve the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Rodrigo. We move to Bongani on his way forward.
Thank you very much. From my side, it's biodiversity should be a fabric on which cities are planned. And secondly, biodiversity and natural open spaces should inform city planning for sustainable cities. And I also want to add to say, we need to mainstream environmental education in everything that we do in order to create empathy for nature. So we want people not to only love nature because they were convinced, but we want people to love nature because they are convicted by its importance. Once you are convicted, nobody can convince you otherwise, but you would be able to become an advocate of why it is we need to protect nature for perpetual existence. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bongani. I'm moving now to Mariana for her taking messages and way forward.
Thank you, Diana. So I can only echo what was already said. I'm a true believer in nature-based solutions as an approach that can help to afford multiple societal and environmental challenges in our cities, such as climate change adaptation. And I want to quote what Renata Polini mentioned, that these efforts for implementation of nature-based solutions in cities, they need to be guided by technical considerations. But equally important, they also need to be guided by social principles, because without them, we risk replicating and enhancing existing inequalities in our cities. And that is something that was also heard a lot, like Kobe mentioned about the need for collaborative commitment and partnership, or Rodrigo speaking about the necessity of being inclusive when speaking about nature-based solutions and creating jobs and livelihoods opportunities. And I like also this concept of really leaving no one behind when implementing nature-based solutions in our cities. And there are already some guidelines and principles out there that we can use in order to navigate in the implementation of such solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariana. And before giving the floor to David Maddox, I will ask Chantal for her concluding remarks and what she takes away from this event today.
Thank you so much, Diana. Yes, it's been indeed very inspiring, and I think we've really heard a lot of interesting, inspiring thoughts, ideas, and also actions that will be taken forward. And I have nothing to add to all that has been said and highlighted. I think, yeah, one element that for me personally is very dear is how we can restore the connection between people and nature, and in particular children and nature, as I think in the end you will only protect what you know, and we are well aware of this idea of what we call plant blindness, the fact that often we don't even know what the plant is that we see in the street, or the bird or the tree that is around us, and at that moment we lose that connection. I think we risk of losing all our relationships with nature, and with that also the future of integrating it and making it alive for future generations. So I think, as already was mentioned, that education programs at any age and any level, but also having opportunities to go out and be inspired and experience nature in cities is important for all of us, and I think it's something that can be done wherever we are in the world, and I think that makes the strongest connection that we hopefully can work towards for the future. As there is a Chinese proverb that says, "Nature doesn't tell its secrets to those who hurry by, but only to those who walk by with quiet heart and seeing eye." And that's something I always kept with me, and I hope that's something we can help to restore around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantal. And we are now moving to David Maddox, our Nature-based Solutions champion today. David, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you. Welcome. Hello from New York City. It's a great honor to be here with all of you and listening to a remarkable collection of inspiring speakers. I can only amplify some of the things that I've already heard many of you say, and that is the need to reach across boundaries of difference, reach across boundaries of misunderstanding to different kinds of people who exist in the communities and cities that we all live in. That they all share the same dream of making a better city, and in that sense, we need to be to take active action to collaborate across those boundaries and recognize different points of view. One of the things that I hold dear from my life in theater is the idea of collaboration, that we are many different types of people. In theater, it is artists and set designers and costume designers and musicians and actors and directors, all trying to work together from their own points of view to do what? Create a better show that people would want to see. Cities are the same thing, that many different points of view, all collaborating, or they should be the same thing, all collaborating together from their points of view to make a better city. We can talk all day about what better means. We can talk all day about what city means, but the fundamental idea is that we need to collaborate with each other to do those things. That the idea, and this is a theater idea, is that through collaboration, we could create something we could not have created by ourselves. But to do that, we have to strive to meet people where they are, because different types of people use different languages, often to describe the same thing. Words like biodiversity don't mean the same thing across the different elements of our societies. Even landscape architects and ecologists, architects, planners, business people. When you say the word biodiversity, we might mean the same thing. Even words like wild don't mean the same thing. Words like evidence don't mean the same thing. We actually have to explore what the words mean that's the first step in creating cities that are better for both people and nature, in which we can understand how we talk to each other. How can we create something that is better with, between, and for each other? So I'm really pleased to be here with you and inspired by all the things that I heard. And together we can do these things, but only if we actually try to be together.
Thank you very much, David Maddox. Yes, indeed, let's act and collaborate. We came to the conclusion of this event, but somehow it's not the end, because we are all working together to boost these nature-based solutions in cities and in other areas. I just want to bring here to you to thank all the panelists and also our nature-based solution champion for joining us today, and also to thank all the attendees that have been that joined us today. I know there are a few other events that have started or are about to start, and some of you are running. I will soon be running into there. The next session of our nature-based solutions series is taking place next week, and it will we will be talking nature-based solutions in the context of peace building. Next week in Geneva takes place the Geneva Peace Building Week, with a lot of events around the peace building. And next year in February, Geneva will host the Environmental Peace Building Conference. So we are also hosting that session in that context. A small note to remind you that the summary of this event, the links and the documents presented will be available on the webpage of the event, as well as the video. The link has been shared in the chat. And we look really forward to see you next week at the next session or at other events we will be hosting in the next weeks. Thank you all.